All right, so moving on to the final segment, we're going to be pivoting over here to the world of basketball inside the NBA world. And in this segment, I'll be sharing which NBA players I do believe will be traded by the NBA trade deadline. So we're a week or so away from the NBA trade deadline, and business is about to pick up heading into the second half of the NBA season. These are the following players I do believe could be traded by the NBA trade deadline. Starting off with player number one on my list, and that would be Giannis. Now, I do believe that Giannis is now viewed as the top trade candidate heading into the NBA trade deadline, and it's time for Giannis and the Milwaukee Bucks to part ways here. Giannis has done everything he could for the Milwaukee Bucks to be a top-tier contending team in the Eastern Conference for countless years, and he's still viewed as a top 5 player in the NBA. He's done it all. Former MVP, former Defensive Player of the Year, former NBA champion, former NBA Finals MVP. It's time for Giannis to go. And Giannis has now came out and said he's open to being traded away from the Milwaukee Bucks. And the Milwaukee Bucks are open to trading away their star player to give him a new home with a different NBA franchise. The time has come. And the Milwaukee Bucks are struggling right now. They are not going to be a heavyweight contender in the East for a long time. They have 18 wins and 27 losses, a bottom tier team in the Eastern Conference as I record this segment for you guys. And the only difference makers other than Giannis on this Milwaukee Bucks team would be Miles Turner. Everybody else, in my opinion, is mid on this roster. And the roster is not built to compete anytime soon in the East. I don't even know why the hell they still believe that Doc Rivers is the answer as the head coach of Milwaukee. But the Bucks don't own their own first round pick until 2031. So it's going to be a rough rebuild if you're a Milwaukee Bucks fan out there. Buckle up. But honestly, now the Milwaukee Bucks will be taking aggressive phone calls from contending teams that have true aspirations to land Giannis in their city. He's still a great two-way player, and you can gain a lot of trade assets for trading for a top 5 player in Giannis before the trade deadline. I think there's going to be a lot of aggressive teams here. I'm looking at the New York Knicks that would love to pair Giannis with Jalen Brunson in New York. Whether they trade Karl Anthony Towns to get Giannis or not, that is something that could be a possibility. We'll see. I'm looking at the Golden State Warriors. They could possibly put together a trade package involving Jonathan Kuminga and unfortunately injured Jimmy Butler to acquire Giannis to pair him up with Steph Curry and Draymond Green and company in Golden State. I'm looking at the Miami Heat. They need to be aggressive. Pat Riley, pick up the damn phone. But I'm looking at the Miami Heat that could be aggressive to get Giannis. And honestly, they have some good trade packages they put together. I'm looking at Khalil Ware and Tyler Hero and possibly something else to acquire Giannis by the NBA trade deadline to bring Giannis to South Beach in Miami. There's a lot of teams that could try to get Giannis. We'll see which one gets lucky to acquire a top 5 player still in the prime of his career by the NBA trade deadline, but we'll see. But it's time for Giannis and the Milwaukee Bucks to part ways, and the trade will happen soon in the NBA. Next player on the list would be Ja Morant. Now, the Grizzlies have to consider moving off of Ja Morant. And I know Ja Morant is sidelined with an elbow sprain injury. He's set to miss time. Whether he comes back a little after the NBA trade deadline or a little after the NBA All-Star break, we'll see. But he's going to miss some time, regardless if he stays home or goes elsewhere. But if you're the Memphis Grizzlies, you have to consider this trade for the long-term plans of your franchise. Like, they still got Jaren Jackson, one of the best defensive players in the league. But I felt like the Grizzlies' championship window closed a few years ago when they were a top-tier team in the West. That year where they got humbled against the Los Angeles Lakers that were a low-seeded team in the West, and they got sent home. I just felt like from there, everything went downhill. And that's where you saw Ja getting in trouble off the court, waving blickies on his social media post, and just doing the wrong things off the court. Right then and there, I felt like the Grizzlies should have cut him or not cut him, but traded him and parted ways with him and evaluated their long-term plan as a franchise. They just fired their head coach a year ago. So I know a lot of people have given up on Ja Morant because of the injuries and the off-the-court nonsense. But I think Ja Morant is still a good quality player. If he has his head straight on, he could be what franchises are looking for in the NBA. I think he's still an explosive player with the ball in his hand. He's a great finisher, great playmaker. I think Ja still has a bright future in the NBA. It's just the injuries and the off the court drama that scares franchises away probably for trading for Ja Morant. But if you're the Grizzlies, I would consider some phone calls by the NBA trade deadline and evaluate where you're at with Ja Morant, and if you have a real chance of keeping him around for the long-term plans in Memphis. And if you don't, I would trade him to a franchise that wants to acquire him by the NBA trade deadline. Next player is Anthony Davis. Now, I do believe that Anthony Davis will be dealt by the NBA trade deadline by the Dallas Mavericks, and I know they're shooting themselves in the foot for that ridiculous trade where they traded away Luka Doncic to get Anthony Davis and bring him to Dallas. Now, it's sad how Anthony Davis's career has gone. I mean, I remember watching Anthony Davis, a wrecking ball with the Kentucky Wildcats, helping them win a national title a few years ago in college basketball, became the first overall pick in the 2012 NBA draft. I remember him being a dominant player with the New Orleans Pelicans. I remember him being a dominant player with the Los Angeles Lakers. Him and LeBron won a championship back in 2020 during the bubble. But I know every player, Father Time hits every player, and sometimes the injuries take them out of their prime before Father Time can. And when Anthony Davis is healthy, he's still an elite two-way player, guys. But that's the thing, when healthy, because he's starting to pile up a history of injuries that sideline him and keep him off the court on a daily basis now. And how can any NBA franchise rely on Anthony Davis to be one of the cornerstone pieces if he's unavailable on a nightly basis? And the Dallas Mavericks were banking on him to be healthy in Dallas, trading away their best player, a generational player, and Luka Doncic. Now, they're lucky. They are very, very lucky that they got graced with the first overall pick to land Cooper Flag during the NBA draft during the summer. And if not, this franchise would be rock bottom with nothing to look forward to for a while in Dallas if you're a basketball fan. But they're paying the price. The Mavericks are paying the price for this Luka Doncic trade last season. And the craziest thing is Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving have only played one game together since the trade last year. And we know that Kyrie Irving is still out recovering from a torn ACL injury. And Anthony Davis has missed over 65 total games with injuries since being acquired by the Dallas Mavericks. That is absolutely insane. And they're a bottom tier team in the Western Conference right now. So what can you really rely on, or what can you really look forward to in the future if you're a Dallas Mavericks fan other than Cooper Flag? You don't really have anything. So I can see some teams being aggressive and calling the Mavericks front office to try to acquire Anthony Davis by the NBA trade deadline. Now, I know that he's sidelined, and I think the earliest he could return to basketball would be early March. But there still could be teams that could be aggressive to acquire Anthony Davis and use him as a second or third scoring option with their teams. I'm looking at some teams that can make a run for him in the East. I'm looking at the Detroit Pistons. They already got Cade Cunningham, a lot of young talent in Detroit. But I'm looking at him and Jalen Duren. That could be a good 1-2 punch big man lineup. Two big men that you can have in your lineup. Move Anthony Davis to the power forward or center position, etc. for Jalen Duren. I'm looking at the Toronto Raptors. That could play a factor to get Anthony Davis, because I'm looking at the Raptors, their situation with Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram. I know RJ Barrett is there, but RJ Barrett could possibly be the sacrificial lamb to bring Anthony Davis to Toronto. I'm not saying that could happen, but that could be in play to give the Raptors a true big man and for them to have three good scoring options in Scotty Barnes, Brandon Ingram. But the thing is, you have to be banking on a healthy Anthony Davis. I think some teams are going to pick up the phone and try to acquire Anthony Davis by the trade deadline. I think if you're the Mavericks, you just got to rewrite your wrong and just go ahead and trade him for a player that really had no business being in Dallas in the first place. But I think Anthony Davis could be dealt by the trade deadline. Next player, we're going to go out to Sacramento. I'm looking at Domantas Sabonis. Domantas Sabonis is actually back in the lineup for the Sacramento Kings. He was sidelined up until a week or so ago with a meniscus tear. That sidelined him November 15th, 16th. And now he's back in the lineup for the Sacramento Kings. But when healthy, Sabonis is a walking double-double. Like, he's actually one of my favorite big men to follow in the NBA. He has great basketball IQ, can score in the paint, play defense, and is a playmaker to get his teammates involved in the offensive game plan on a nightly basis. So Sabonis is actually the best player a part of the Sacramento Kings right now, in my opinion. And honestly, looking at his contract, he has a $42.3 million salary that is workable for trades. So there could be a lot of teams calling the Sacramento Kings front office to acquire Sabonis by the NBA trade deadline. We'll see if he's dealt, but I do believe that's a player to pay attention to. Next player, this is already basically confirmed, Jonathan Kuminga. Now, Jonathan Kuminga will most likely be traded away from the Golden State Warriors. He's already expressed his feelings of how he's felt about the team and not getting opportunities, and he's already requested a trade. And for some odd reason, I thought Jonathan Kuminga was always a really solid piece on the Golden State Warriors, but him and Steve Kerr never saw eye to eye. Even though Jonathan Kuminga was a part of that championship team a few years ago, I was thinking maybe as time goes on, where Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson are getting older, players like Jonathan Kuminga and Jordan Poole could carry the load and be cornerstone pieces for the Golden State Warriors to help the aging veterans. But we all know that Klay's not there anymore. We all know that Jordan Poole is no longer in town because him and Draymond Green could not keep their hands separated from each other during that fight years ago. But as I digress, I think it's time for Jonathan Kuminga to be traded by the trade deadline. He hasn't been happy with his role with the franchise for the last few years, and honestly, you saw his role decrease once the Golden State Warriors traded for Jimmy Butler to acquire him from the Miami Heat, and they brought him to the Bay Area. So that even made things even worse for Jonathan Kuminga and his relationship with the Warriors. But I think this is a young player that has a lot of upside, and I think there's a lot of teams that could call the Golden State Warriors front office to try to acquire Jonathan Kuminga. I'm looking at teams like the Washington Wizards. They just got Trae Young. They probably want to give Trae Young some pieces out there in DC, like Sarr. You could bring Jonathan Kuminga in. The Trailblazers, when Damian Lillard gets back, they got some pieces, Drew Holiday and company. They could possibly trade for Jonathan Kuminga to build something in Portland. I think of the Milwaukee Bucks, they could trade for him. If you're going to, like I said, if you're going to offer the package for him and Jimmy Butler to try to get Giannis, I mean, they could build around Jonathan Kuminga possibly. Or the Sacramento Kings. I think all those teams are in play to acquire the services of Jonathan Kuminga, but I do believe he's definitely going to be dealt by the NBA trade deadline. Next player, Michael Porter Jr. Now, it's unfortunate for Michael Porter Jr. because he's in no man's land right now in the East, playing with one of the worst teams in the league in the Brooklyn Nets. They have a long rebuild ahead of him because we remember that they put all their chips on the table to run a championship caliber team with Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie Irving a few years ago. That didn't work out. They traded all of them one by one. But it was a sacrifice. If you were a part of the sacrifice trade if you were Michael Porter Jr. because the Nuggets got Cam Johnson during the summer. And as good as a player Cam Johnson is, unfortunately, Michael Porter Jr. got the bad end of the stick here to play with one of the worst teams in the league. Now, the Nets could add to their 2032 unprotected first-round pick if they received anything from they could receive. Let me say that again. The Nuggets could add to the 2032 unprotected first-round pick they received from the Nuggets if Michael Porter Jr. is moved by the NBA trade deadline. So, I mean, they need to build for the future immediately. So draft picks can help them. Maybe they can have a similar story to the Oklahoma City Thunder one day. But the Nets are in the conversation for being one of the worst teams in the league. And Michael Porter Jr. is still in the prime of his career. I think they should do him a solid and trade him to a contending team by the NBA trade deadline to acquire more assets to rebuild for their future. We've got two more players left on the list. Next player would be Kristaps Porzingis. Now, I think Porzingis is going to be traded away from Atlanta after the Atlanta Hawks traded Trae Young away a few weeks ago. This allows the Hawks to move off of him, and so they can rebuild and focus on the long term for their franchise. I mean, Porzingis has an expiring contract of $30.7 million and could gain flexibility to take back his salary in future years. So I think the Atlanta Hawks are going to trade Porzingis by the NBA trade deadline. And last but not least, Nikola Vucevic. I think Vucevic is going to be traded away from the Chicago Bulls. Now, I don't even know what the hell the Chicago Bulls are waiting for in the front office. Like, the way they do business is just stupid as hell. Like, if you guys remember, they had DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine there for years. And they should have traded off of them for a long time in Chicago, but they didn't. And they just waited till they got nothing for him in return. And look, I'm not sure what the front office has plans for this upcoming NBA offseason, but Nikola Vucevic, and they have Nikola Vucevic and 7 other players expiring that are playing on expiring contracts heading into the offseason. So you're going to have half of your roster as free agents, and there's no long-term plan there for Chicago. Like, what are you guys doing? Are you content with being a play-in tournament team year in and year out? Do you ever want to get back to the glory days of the 90s where you dominated and had 2 separate three-peats? Michael Jordan, Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen, and others. Like, I don't know what they're doing, but Nikola Vucevic, he's 35, and he's averaging 16 points per game. I think the franchise should honestly do him a solid and trade him to a contending team, whether it's in the East or in the West, by the NBA trade deadline, because they have no idea what the hell they want to do in Chicago. But those are my thoughts on which players will be traded by the NBA trade deadline. That is my thoughts on that, and I'm looking forward to the second half of the NBA season. But that is all the time I have for you guys today. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. This is your host, Thomas Tyree, signing off, and I'll see you guys on next week's episode.